It's time to chill out and get ready for a mediocre Q&A live stream. If you're old enough, grab yourself your favorite adult beverage, and if you're not, stick with apple juice. Put your feet up and relax. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. And now let's cue up the intro music. Hello, how are you guys doing this evening? Hopefully you guys are doing well. A couple things we want to talk about this evening, and as usual, I got a little list of things to go over. I'm going to cover the last couple videos. I actually got 2 videos out this week, so we're getting a little bit better. I was having a hard time after the new year actually getting out with some normal videos. I do have to say, and I'll say it at the end of the stream too, that it's only been like several months, but my wife and I finally filmed another HVACR Life episode that will be uploading Wednesday morning. So it'll be popping up Wednesday morning West Coast time, which should hit Wednesday afternoon East Coast time. So that'll be coming soon. This one we're going to be talking about finances and just kind of going over. We'd been teasing this one forever, and it just took us a while to both get in my office and actually sit down and have a conversation. So I think the key thing is with these, you know, and I kind of do it with my videos too, but with the whole Q&A series or the HVACR Life that I was doing with my wife, I found myself trying to rehearse everything, right? And that's not what we're doing with those. So it was more of a candid conversation. We kind of had a general idea what we wanted to talk about, but it was trying to get a little more just a conversation between the two of us and just kind of talking about things. Let me know how you guys like it when it does release. Again, it'll pop out Wednesday, and then we'll hopefully get you guys some to give us some feedback on that and see what you think. Anyways, how many times can I say see what you think? But all right, so want to talk about the videos, right? I released 2 videos last week. One of them was on a hybrid walk-in cooler / freezer. The reason why I say hybrid, I got a bunch of questions about that. Why is it called a hybrid freezer? It's because I call it a hybrid, okay? I come up with all kinds of weird terms for my systems, right? I think one of the most common things that I get the weirdest question on is when I call whatever I don't know the name of it, I call it a chingus. And everybody freaks out like, whoa, it's not a chingus. It's not a chingus. Guys, it's just a term. Like I come up with the weirdest terms for all kinds of crap, right? Anyways, so I call it a hybrid freezer because the customer maintains 27 degrees in the box. So it's just barely below freezing, but it's not what you would normally consider to be a walk-in freezer, right? Because a walk-in freezer typically is -10 or zero or below, basically. All right. And a walk-in cooler typically is 32 degrees or above. So it's that weird hybrid area, I call it. So anyways, we had a hybrid walk-in cooler. And I will definitely, hey, Twiz, dude, thanks for becoming a supporter on the channel, man. I really appreciate it. So I have brain fart is what I did right there. Anyways, so the video was about a hybrid walk-in cooler that the customer called me and they said that it was not maintaining the correct temperature. But then when I got there, the thing was working. That was the tricky thing, right, guys? Big picture diagnosis, just like I said. So I went up on the roof and talking to the customer, I found out immediately that it was a defrost clock that was likely the problem because the customer had called me an hour and a half previous to when I arrived and it was down to temperature by the time I got there. And the customer said the fans weren't running, right? So I went up on the roof, found that the defrost clock was an hour and a half out of defrost and the defrost clock was kind of sticky too. So but I didn't just stop there, right? Because I'm looking at the big picture, as I always preach. So I went ahead and found that the system was low on charge, okay? Went ahead and corrected that really quick. And I have to make that clear. I got a couple comments too saying, how come you were testing the expansion valve when it was low on charge? I cleared the sight glass and adjusted the charge first. Then I went down after I cleared up the glass, got the system operating properly with a solid column of liquid going to the expansion valve. Then I jumped on the expansion valve and found that the superheat was way out of range. I want to say it was like 30 something degrees. Tried to adjust it and it wouldn't take the adjustment. It basically went down to like 15, but then the valve was basically backed out as far as it would go. So obviously we had something going on with the valve. Okay. And I went ahead and quoted it. And in all honesty, that video was from about 2 months ago. The customer took that long to approve it. I got the system operating and then they took forever to approve it. And then they finally approved it. We went back in and I did it last week, basically, where I went ahead and replaced the expansion valve. Okay, the system came down to temperature. Everything was operating properly once I changed the valve. I mean, everything, it was already down to temp before I changed the valve. We got the system operating, but big picture diagnosis, guys, very important. I can't stress that one enough, looking at the big picture, okay? We find problems that maybe the system could have operated half-ass okay, but it wasn't operating efficiently. I didn't lie to the customer. I went to them and I said, look, this system has an issue with this, and I'm seeing this. How do you want to address this? You know, so people say, like, you know, my customers won't go for that kind of diagnosis. They just want it fixed and they want us out of there. Well, that's not how I roll. And I'm not trying to say I'm up on some high horse and I'm better than everybody. I'm not. But I try to give my customers the best service. And if my customers don't appreciate my service, then, you know, we might have to move on. So thank you very much, Terry, for that supporter role. I really appreciate it. You became a supporter of the channel. Thanks a lot, dude. So, you know, I understand that you guys have to operate differently. Some customers don't let you guys fix things the way that you want to. And I'm not trying to say that I'm better than anybody, but, you know, I try to give my customers all the options and let them know this is what's wrong and they can choose to fix it or not. But I'm still going to look at the big picture. Even if I know they're not going to fix it, I'm still going to look at the big picture and I'm going to document the heck out of it. That's the biggest, best advice I can give you guys is document everything. And nowadays, guys, we have absolutely no excuse about not documenting something. Guys, it's so easy. We snap a picture with our phone. We attach it to the invoice, we send it in an email, and you type everything out. In the past, we had to handwrite everything, and then the customer just couldn't read our writing and that kind of stuff. But nowadays, you know, we just type everything out. Ironically, on the flip side, now we have customers complaining that we don't know how to spell, but that's a whole nother thing. They need to get over that one, right? Because we're dumb, knuckle-busting mechanics. We don't necessarily have to know how to spell everything. So, I did have another technician with me on there, and I want to clarify something too on that video was, when I sprayed down the condenser coil with the misting device, right? I was using my mister because I was cleaning it and I was bringing the head pressure down. The reason why I was doing that was because I had already cleared the sight glass and then I put the misting device on there and carefully brought the head pressure down below the bypass pressure of the head pressure control valve and checked the refrigerant charge when the head pressure control valve was flooding the condenser, okay? So that's what I was doing with the mister. So anyways, we took care of the problem. I ended up finding the leak. The leak was up on the roof. I repaired the leak, changed the dryer, changed the expansion valve. We ended up changing the thermostat too on that particular call, because while we were in there, we noticed that the original thermostat was a piece of crap one, and it was all rusted out, and I just didn't feel comfortable. And we had to move the thermostat to change the expansion valve, so we were kind of tugging on the capillary sensing bulb. So it was just like, you know what? It's a cheap thermostat. I had a miscellaneous in my quote of $100. It covered the thermostat, you know, so we went ahead and changed that too. Again, big picture, right? You know, and then just try to, and then everything worked properly on that system, and it was good to go after that. Okay. So, I see lots of stuff going on in the chat. I'll definitely try to, get to your guys' questions. As usual, guys, if you do have questions, please put them in caps lock. It really helps myself and the moderators, or my moderator, Justin, to field the questions, so that way we can make sure that I try to get to them, okay? Don't hesitate to repost your question if I don't answer it, okay? Guys, the lowercase, there's oftentimes a totally separate chat going on within the chat right there. And as these things are scrolling by on my face, on my screen right now, it's hard for me to see the lowercase stuff. I honestly don't pay too much attention to the lowercase. So the questions need to be in caps lock. That way we can see them. Okay, cool. All right. Let me see what I got. I really appreciate the support, guys. You guys are really cool. I really appreciate the feedback too, guys. And that's another thing too. I am 100%, I've said this many times before, completely open to criticism. I know that my shit stinks, guys. I know it, okay? I know that I don't know everything. I know that I make mistakes, and I am totally open to hearing it. Just don't be a punk about it. You know, let me know, hey, you screwed up on that. That's cool, you know, but you don't got to belittle me, right? I mean, we are human here, okay? But again, let me know if I mess something up, or if you have a different opinion, or you have a question, or you have feedback. I'm always looking for that, okay? Emails, all that good stuff, all right? So what I want to do is I want to get to my list of things right here. So I mentioned that we've got the HVACR Life series coming out. The other video that I released was my Delfield reach-in cooler video. Again, big picture diagnosis, guys. I went up. The reach-in was working okay. It was iced up, but once I defrosted it, it kind of came down to temp, but I was just watching it. I was testing everything. I noticed that the sensors on that reach-in weren't reading accurately, right? But then I went and looked further. It wasn't just the sensors, because I could have just changed the sensors, but I noticed there was water damage on the temperature controller, and it's a digital Danfoss ERC controller, and I noticed there was some water damage on it. And from my personal experience, I know that when we have water damage controllers, it just leads to all chaos. So I changed the controller, the digital display, the communication cable, and the sensors, okay? And then I watched the unit cycle after that, because again, we're looking at the big picture. We're gonna make sure that when I walked away from that, that unit was working properly. There's always the possibility that something else would happen after, but at least while I was there, I did everything in my power to make sure that that reach-in was working properly. If you guys aren't getting the picture here, I'm always talking about being thorough, being honest, communicating with the customer, and looking at the big picture. That's the best advice I can give you. I'm not necessarily the smartest person in the world. I'm not necessarily going to tell you that, you know, how to answer or how to fix every single thing out there, but I will encourage you to step back and look at the big picture as usual, okay? Again, you guys that are becoming supporters, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate it, okay? How often are ice maker failures due to the lack of maintenance and just need cleaned? Storm, I would say that ice machine cleaning probably equates to be 80 to 85% of ice machine calls are dirty ice machines, okay? Ice machines' worst nightmare is water. Ironically, ice machines need water to make ice. So there's your problem. We can eliminate majority of our ice machine calls if we have a normal preventative maintenance program set up, a qualified service technician is performing that preventative maintenance, and we have decent water quality coming to the ice machine. Again, on the flip side, or ironically, you can have water that is too clean, and it can affect ice machines too. Okay, if you have a deionizer on your water coming into the ice machine, that can affect things, especially once you get into these ice machines that have microprocessor controls. The new Manitowoc ice machines that have the Indigo microphones for the ice thickness, those things will get screwed up if you have deionized water coming to them. So it's a fine line between having too clean of water, but some sort of filtration on your water coming into the machine, and a normal routine preventative maintenance program at a minimum every 3 to 6 months for sure. Sometimes, depending on the water quality, you might have to do it every month. It just depends, okay? But ice machines, yeah, biggest problem with them is water-related issues, okay? What's my favorite HVACR service book for new service technicians? My favorite book is called, okay, so that's kind of a fine line, because my favorite book for refrigeration service is Commercial Refrigeration for Air Conditioning Technicians by Mr. Dick Wirtz. But if you're not mechanically inclined, that book is more geared towards service technicians that are already HVAC techs and want to do refrigeration. It just kind of goes in depth explaining the controls and all that good stuff. So as far as my favorite book, I don't really have a favorite one. Modern Refrigeration's a decent one. I think that I have got the AHRI Fundamentals of HVAC is another book that I have up there, but I learned from Modern Refrigeration. I think it was Tom Seepeck or Sypeck. I can't remember the name, the guy that wrote that book, but Modern Refrigeration. That was the one that I cut my teeth on. But you guys, for me, I'm not the kind of person that can just open up a book and read. I'm more of a read the book, do hands-on, hear from another person, and then someday it'll all click. So I like various resources. There's several great YouTube channels out there. There's a great resource I'd suggest you check out is hvacrschool.com. That is a buddy of mine, Brian's website, and he does really good with helping to educate with more fundamentals and things, okay? A really, really great resource is manufacturers, right? So one of the manufacturers who happens to be a sponsor of my videos and my stream is Sporlan. And Sporlan has a lot of great resources online. And in fact, I've got a little clip that I want to show you that's going to kind of tie everything in together. But really quickly, I want to explain that Sporlan is actually, and I had this on my list, but it's funny how this all worked out. We segue into it. Sporlan is, they changed their website, and they're just kind of redirecting. And their new web address is sporlan.com. Okay, so you don't have to go sporlanonline.com anymore. It's just sporlan.com, and they actually changed some things around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up a screen share of Sporlan's website, and I'm actually going to answer a question using their website, and it's going to make sense to you guys once I do this. Okay, so give me a second. But I had a question about, and it was from another technician. He had sent me an email, and he was saying that he was having pressure drop issues. What he thought to be pressure drop issues. He had a temperature drop, a 3-degree temperature drop across a filter dryer on an air conditioning system. But what he was confused about was that he had a 3-degree temperature drop across both filter dryers for each circuit within that air conditioning system. So he had a 15-ton air conditioner, and he had two 16-inch or 16 cubic inch dryers on there, right? Two 7.5-ton compressors is the math that I was doing just by looking at his email. And I started thinking about it. And again, in my head, a 7.5-ton compressor, to me, a 16 cubic inch dryer isn't big enough. That's where the manufacturers come in to play, right? Whether it be Sporlan or whether it be an ice machine manufacturer. If you guys have questions about a particular ice machine, or you want to learn more about ice machines, look up the manufacturers and go to their websites. They always have the best information. Same thing. If he's curious about a pressure or temperature drop across a filter dryer, 3 degrees temperature drop, that's kind of a marginal one. I don't know if I'm going to change a dryer for a 3-degree temperature drop. But let's look at the pressure drop. Let's check a few things. But with a 7.5-ton compressor, off the top of my head, a 16 cubic inch dryer is on the hair side of being small. But we can easily investigate that using Sporlan's website. And I'm actually going to pull that up right now, so give me a second. And we're going to pull up their website. Hold on just one second. Sporlan. I'm a pecker when I type, so. And give me one second. Let me pull it up. Yeah, it takes me a minute when I type things out. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and screen share really quick. And I'm going to show you how easy it is to find out what size filter dryer you should use when you talk about tonnage of a system, okay? It's really not that bad. But you can also simply open up the dryer, look on the box, and they have a recommended tonnage size on the side of the box too, where it tells you, if you're working on air conditioning, we recommend this size filter dryer, right? If you have a dirty system, you might need to go bigger with the filter dryer depending on it, okay? And also another thing to think about too before I screen share right now is that just because something comes with a certain size dryer doesn't mean that that's necessarily the right dryer once the system has contamination issues. Sometimes I've noticed that on certain air conditioning manufacturers, they might, like for instance, Train will ship a 32 cubic inch dryer on like a 5-ton package unit. I've seen it before. Well, 32 cubic inch dryer is rather small, right? So on a system cleanup or a system repair, I'm going to put a bigger dryer in that system. But you've got to be careful when you add a bigger filter dryer to a system. You have to know that it's going to have more storage capabilities. So therefore, you're going to need to adjust your refrigerant charge, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and screen share over here. And mind you, I'm not looking at the chat right now, guys, but I'll definitely get back to it here in a minute, okay? So we're going to screen share over. Let me go ahead and close this off, transition over. This is Sporland's new website. It's sporland.com, but it redirects you to parker.com. Same thing, okay? So if we scroll down right here, we've got a tab that says literature. If we click on literature, it's really easy. And we're going to scroll down, and I'll go ahead and make this, scroll right on down here, and we've got catch all filter dryers. We're going to click on catch all filter dryers, right? And we're going to go to the top one, Sporland Bulletin 40-10. Guys, this is all the information you can get. There's great information in here. So I know that this is on page 10, so I'm going to scroll down to page 10, and we're going to have dryer sizes basically right here, recommended dryer sizes. And let's see, here we go right here, okay? This is for 134A, so let me go down for R22. And if we look at a 16 cubic inch dryer, which is labeled right here, it basically tells you that in an air conditioning for a field replacement that they recommend 16 cubic inch dryer be for a 1.5 ton through a 5-ton system, okay? Now, if you want to go bigger, for 4 through 10 tons, they recommend using a 30 cubic inch dryer, okay? So for the person that emailed me, forgive me, I don't have your name right now, right off the bat, when you sent me the pictures, my immediate thing was those dryers look to be too small if that system has any sort of contamination, okay? But a 3-degree temperature drop doesn't necessarily concern me, okay? If I started to notice a bigger pressure drop, I would need to put my gauges on there and check the pressure drop across it and start to notice if we're having a plug up situation. But if you have contamination, I highly suggest using Sporland's recommended sizing charts, okay, to get you the right size dryer for that system, okay? So I'm going to turn the screen share off, and then we're going to go back to our normal display and bring it on over, okay? Again, using Sporland's website, super easy. It's all the same information that they've always had. Nothing really changed, okay? It's just they just made it a little bit easier to get to it, so. All right, let me see what we got going on inside the chat. I know I missed a ton here, okay? Another thing too, when I was talking about ice machines, every manufacturer, like ice machines they use the same concept. They bring the temperature of the evaporator well below freezing. They run water across the evaporator. It freezes it. But where the ice machine manufacturers change is in the style of ice cubes that they make, in the way that they harvest the ice, and their control strategy, okay? That's where you really need the manufacturer's information, all right? That's why you need to look at the OEM's website, download the manuals, read that information. It will greatly help you guys out, okay? Let me see what I am missing in here. Storm, you said you just serviced a display cooler that stunk. The cause was a dirty P-trap. Have you heard of putting some sort of smell good to prevent this? I mean, I've heard of people putting all kinds of different things in systems to eliminate drain odors and stuff like that. Ideally, if you have drain odors, really what it means is you have some sort of contaminants getting into that drain pan and it's not being cleaned out fast enough. Sometimes on prep coolers and reach-in coolers, they don't necessarily have them in even display cases. I don't know your situation, but oftentimes they won't necessarily drain them into an actual drain, and they will oftentimes rely on some sort of evaporation to remove the condensation that builds up in the drain pans, okay? When that happens, you can get smells and different odors, especially if the customers have a dirty box and they're rinsing the evaporators down, or there's a drain that goes into a common drain and goes down into the drain pan, okay? Ideally, you want to do more preventative maintenances. I know that the customer isn't necessarily going to approve that stuff, but you know, if you have continuing complaints, that's a way to recommend to the customer, look, you know, depending on the situation, we might need to go ahead and do more preventative maintenances where we clean this. Now, I do know there's all kinds of products out there to help to maintain drain pans, keep them clean. I know refrigeration technologies, I've never used it, but they have some sort of a product that you spray in the drain pans to help water so it doesn't sit in there and it moves along. That's something. Hey, Joe, thank you very much for that super chat, man. That was awesome. Okay, really appreciate it. So, can I charge extra to a customer for stupidity? Yeah. I wish sometimes. There's sometimes that, you know, they call you out and they say, oh my gosh, we need you now. And then you get there and you're like, okay, I'm going to turn the switch on and move on, you know? So yeah, you wish you can charge them for stupidity for sure. So again, thanks so much for that super chat, Joe. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to my list right here. I had a question. It was, what's the rule of thumb for superheat and subcooling when it's talking about direct expansion systems, when we're talking about reach-in coolers, when we're talking about air conditioners? And guys, rules of thumb can be dangerous, okay? Rules of thumb can get you in the ballpark, but you always want to lean on the manufacturer for the proper way that they design the system, especially when you're dealing with reach-in coolers and reach-in freezers, walk-in coolers and walk-in freezers, okay? Engineers and you know, the people that design those systems, they may have had something in mind when they designed it, especially when you're talking about reach-in coolers and reach-in freezers. Okay, so we generally have a rule of thumb if we're working on a reach-in cooler. You know, you want to see if it's or on an air conditioning system. You know, you have some general rules of thumb when it comes to superheat and subcooling, but you always want to lean on the manufacturer, okay? Obviously, we have, if you're doing with a fixed orifice metering system on a air conditioning system, you're going to use the target superheat method, right? And if you have a refrigeration system that has an expansion valve and it has a receiver, you typically want to have some sort of a sight glass on there to help to make sure that you have a solid column of liquid going to the expansion valve. Either way, if your system has an expansion valve, it needs a solid column of liquid going to it for the valve to work correctly, okay? With that being said, I had another question, and Tristan had asked me, and he's referring to my video about the R290 cooler that I converted to 134A. And he asked me, because in the video, when I put the factory, when I weighed in the factory equivalent, I guess, not even equivalent, but when I put in the 134A on the first charge of the system, I mentioned that we had no subcooling and we had vapor going back to my evaporator. And he's asking me, what do you mean by vapor going back to your evaporator? What will that cause? Well, what I meant by that was that I had 0 degrees subcooling coming out of my condenser. There was no receiver on the system, so that therefore meant that I had no liquid refrigerant going back to my expansion valve at my evaporator. And with that being said, if we feed vapor to an expansion valve, the expansion valve can't perform its duties properly. An expansion valve is meant to have a solid column of liquid refrigerant going to it, so that way it can properly work, basically, okay? So that if we had 0 degrees subcooling and vapor going back to the expansion valve, the system is not going to come down to temperature and you're going to have issues, or at least it's going to take a lot longer to come down to temperature and you're going to have issues, okay? Let me get to my next question I had here, and I'm gonna talk about this too. As far as the R290 video that was a week and a half ago, I got so many questions, guys, of people asking me, how come you used 134A? Why didn't you use an R22 equivalent? Why didn't I use 407C? Why didn't I use R22? Why did, you know, what? Okay, the reason why I used 134A in that system was because I was trying to prove a point. There's a common theme within the Facebook groups of many people out there that I've seen saying that they were assuming, again, I'm making an assumption that they were afraid of R290, so they would simply take the R290 out of the system and put 134A in it and it would work properly. So I was trying to dispel a myth when I made that video, okay? And in doing that, yes, I realized there would have been other refrigerants that would have worked better than 134A. But I'm not in the business of trying to, on video, show experiments that theoretically could potentially lead to other people doing those experiments too, okay? So I showed the 134A one because I knew it wouldn't work, but I'm really not, I don't want to go out there and start doing these mad scientist experiments and hey, Brad, dude, that is awesome, man. Thank you very much for that super chat, dude. Wow. Thank you, bud. So yeah, I can't be going showing other gases and different things like that. You got to realize that these videos do become a liability for me at some point. So I just don't want someone watching my video saying, Chris said so, it works fine. You know, all this stuff. That's not what I want. Okay. I was trying to dispel a myth by using 134A. Okay. All right, I want to get to the chat here and see any template or routine I have for diagnosing intermittent issues. That's a great question. And you're asking me as far as RTUs and walk-ins, etc. Well, first off, if you're trying to diagnose an intermittent issue, you need to properly understand how the system works in the first place. What is the sequence of operation? What is supposed to happen? Okay. Once you understand how a system works, you're going to be able to evaluate it even better. Then you need to investigate. You need to do your vital signs, look at the system, check the refrigerant charge, make sure everything's clean first and foremost, make sure that you're getting proper temperature differentials across things, then talk and communicate with the customer and ask them what the complaint is. Why? Is there a certain time that it's happening? Investigating those problems, asking them, does it happen at this time of the day or does it happen at that time of the day? That's really going to lead you in the right direction, okay? And then sometimes you just have to hurry up and wait and watch the system operate, okay? Again, communicating with the customer, letting them know, hey, it's working properly right now. What do you want me to do? I can sit here and wait, or we can let it go, and most of the time I try to encourage them. Let me watch it for a bit. Let's see what goes on here. See if we can, diagnose any issues, see something that's happening. Okay. So there's no one-stop pony that I can tell you that's going to help you to solve intermittent issues. It just takes some time of watching the system. Okay. Now, with that being said, I had a question on my list here that I want to talk about that kind of goes along with that. Okay. So, Nelson had asked me about fuses that keep blowing when nothing is grounded or shorting out. Now, I don't know, Nelson. I don't know if you're a service technician or not. I kind of get the idea that you might not be a service technician from the way that your question was worded. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't mind if non-service technicians are watching this, okay? But he had said he has nothing grounded, nothing shorted out, and he keeps blowing fuses, okay? So there's a lot of different troubleshooting methods, right? First and foremost, blowing fuses can be a direct short, or it can be something working too hard to the point that it overloads the fuse or it overloads the motor or whatever. The system draws high current and it blows a fuse. You could also have intermittent electrical shorts. You can have bad electrical connections, right? One of the biggest things, and Nelson had even mentioned in this, that he noticed that on the disconnect switch, that one of the knives that the disconnect switch was on there seemed like it was kind of discolored, okay? Now, it is okay for the knives on a disconnect switch to be discolored so long as you're getting proper connection, proper electrical connection. The easiest way to find out if you have a disconnect switch that is not working properly is to take some voltage measurements to see if there's a voltage drop, to take some current measurements, but also you can use a thermal imaging camera, and you can also use infrared laser, and you can kind of go through the system as long as you know how it's supposed to be operating properly, okay? So in diagnosing an intermittent issue, again, that kind of leads into that because you need to know how the system operates properly. You need to know how to do voltage drop tests and different things like that using a thermal imaging camera and or an infrared laser to go through the system and say, hey, you know what? I'm getting higher than normal temperatures coming out of this fuse and it's not as hot going into it. Maybe we have a bad connection somewhere, okay? All right, let me see what I'm missing inside the chat here, okay? Let me see. What is the best way to acquire new customers? Jason, I am not the smartest business person in the world, so I don't know the answer to that question. There's lots of people that will tell you, use this particular marketing method. I'm going to tell you the way that has worked for me. It's taken a long time, and I've gained my customers via honesty, okay? We started with one customer in 1987 when my dad started the company, okay? My dad doesn't really work in the field anymore. He has like a support role in the office, but he only comes in. Well, anyways, yeah. But we have built our business off of that one customer that we started with. Okay. We started very small, and over the years, we have continued to grow at our choosing via word of mouth. Okay. When we made a customer happy and a manager happy, and they left that restaurant and they moved on to another restaurant, or they told their friends about us, and then their friends called us, or they called us from the next restaurant, and that has worked for us. Now, I realize that is not going to work for everybody, okay? That's just the method that we've always used. We don't advertise. I have my name on the side of my van, but to be honest with you, the only reason why I have my name there was because of a customer that I had before that required I had my name, okay? I'm not looking, I have a website, but I don't even use it, right? Because I'm not looking for that kind of business. business. And I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I mean, I turn down a lot of business because I can't keep up with the load that I have to maintain the quality of service that I do. But if you're in the commercial side, I will say that if you want to get more customers, one of the better ways to do so is to start doing warranty work for a lot of the manufacturers. The manufacturers, you can get in as a warranty if you can get in with them. That can be difficult too, but you need to become an ASA, an authorized service agent for one of the refrigerator or ice machine manufacturers. And then that's going to get you in there doing warranty work. Unfortunately, warranty work isn't, it's not very profitable to do warranty work. More or less, it kind of pays your wages and it gets you in the door. I typically don't do warranty work. I do it for my customers only, but I'm not an authorized service agent for, outside customers or anything like that. Okay. So I am not the best business person in the world to give that advice. I would say that my buddy Tersh Blissett over at the Service Business Mastery podcast can probably help you out a little bit better because he handles all that, especially when it comes to the residential stuff, but he does some commercial stuff too. And he handles all the network marketing and all kinds of stuff like that. So go check out my buddy Tersh Blissett over at Service Business Mastery podcast. And I'm sure he could help you out a little bit more with a better way to get customers, okay? All right, let me see what I'm missing down in the chat here. Talk about pressures and temperatures you're looking for on coolers and freezers with common refrigerators for the new guys, okay? So, Brad, one of the first things that we want to talk about when it comes to pressures and temperatures is, again, I'm going to give credit where credit is due, and maybe it came from someone else, but where I heard it from was from Mr. Jim Bergman, and Jim had said, you have no business putting your service gauges on a system if you don't already know what the pressure should be, okay? And again, he may not have come up with that, but that's where I heard it from, okay? And there's so much truth in that. You really have no business putting your gauges on a walk-in cooler if you don't know what to expect. That is where a proper apprenticeship and proper training comes in. Okay. I realize that some companies don't do that and they throw you to the wolves. So you're going to have to do your due diligence, do a lot of research and figure it out. Obviously, these podcasts and these videos and these live streams are a source of education somewhat for some people, right? But don't just listen to me because I'm some dude on the internet that has a bunch of followers. You got to do the research yourself too. I'll give you some tips, but you need to fact check it. You need to look it up. Okay. Most manufacturers, and let's just talk about walk-in coolers. Most manufacturers on a walk-in, they're going to recommend, for the most part, or they're going to design a system to have about a 10-degree evaporator temperature differential. Okay, that is the difference between the suction saturation temperature of the refrigerant in the system, in the evaporator, and the return air temperature coming into the evaporator. Okay, that is your TD. Oftentimes, the walk-in cooler TDs are designed at 10 degrees, unless they've got a peculiar system, maybe with flowers or something that they may change it, okay? But a general walk-in cooler is going to have a 10-degree TD. Well, that's what helps us a lot. If we understand generally what the TD should be, then we know that my evaporator temperature, which is going to equate to a suction pressure eventually, should be 10 degrees below the box temperature or the return air temperature, okay? So that gets us in the ballpark with an idea of what our suction pressure should be. Because if we understand how a temperature pressure chart works, I have a temperature pressure chart right here, and it basically tells you that at any given pressure, that refrigerant will be a certain temperature, period. That's it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. At any given pressure, a refrigerant will be a certain temperature. Now, there's some weird stuff that happens in there because we have blended refrigerants nowadays. We have a lot of blended refrigerants. And if you have a high glide refrigerant and you've lost some charge, you could have some fractionation issues. But fractionation is something that's used as a scare tactic, I think. It's not as big as a lot of people make it out to be, but I do have to preface my comment by saying fractionation, okay? There is truth to some of it, but it's not as scary as everybody makes it out to be, okay? But anyways, I'm going off on a tangent and I need to get back on course. So if we understand what our evaporator TD should be, then that gets us in the ballpark of what our evaporator pressure should be. But before we start playing with our evaporator TD and our evaporator suction pressure, we need to make sure that we have the right amount of refrigerant in the system. We need to make sure that our expansion valve is being fed liquid refrigerant. And that's where a sight glass comes into a system, on a system that has a liquid line receiver. Okay, we're typically going to charge to a clear sight glass, again, paying attention to vital signs, looking at the head pressure, assuming that our head pressure, we have a general rule of thumb for condensing temp over ambient, meaning that our condensing saturation temperature is not going to be this much or is going to be a roundabout above ambient. Again, we have to be careful with rules of thumb, but for a microchannel condenser on a walk-in cooler, for the most part, you're going to have about a 20-degree condensing temp over ambient. And for a tube and fin condenser, it's going to be somewhere between 25 to 30 degrees, okay? Again, I realize I'm saying some technical terms for the newer guys, and you have to understand that you guys got to do some work on your own too. So that will make sense to you as you start reading some more, okay? And that gives you some general ideas where your pressure should be. If you're getting that deep into it, I highly suggest you read Commercial Refrigeration for Air Conditioning Technicians. It helps you to understand a little bit more about what's going on. That book is written by Mr. Dick Wers, okay? I'm going to go ahead and get into the, oh yeah, here we go right here. So I had a question, and Mike, I'm going to answer your question because it was a question on here too. Mike asked me my thoughts on VRF systems for residential versus commercial. So VRF has a couple different names. Different manufacturers have their own type. There's VRV, there's VRF, variable refrigerant volume, variable refrigerant flow. They're, basically they're systems that modulate compressor speeds, okay, have electronic expansion valves, and the compressor for the most part will speed up, and for higher load situations will slow down for lower load situations, so that way we're not overcooling the area too fast. We're cooling it at a nice even temperature. That is, in a nutshell, an easy way to explain the VRF system, okay? Now, there's some advantages to using VRF systems. There's some disadvantages to using them. I would say that one of the disadvantages versus is miles and miles of refrigerant piping going all throughout the building, okay, and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of pounds of refrigerant piped all through the system. So you have a higher potential for refrigerant leaks. Now, on the flip side, you have a hydronic system or a water-cooled system, or a water, glycol system, right, where you have a chiller downstairs and you're pumping some sort of cooling fluid, whether it be glycol, all through the system. But then you have the potential for water pipe leaks all over the place, okay? So there's goods and bads. I do not work on VRF systems, okay? But I do know that the VRF systems have a lot of really interesting technology built into them, microprocessors that control everything. You have all kinds of electronic expansion valves all over the system. They have potential to be super energy efficient, meaning that you can cool one room while heating another room. I mean, they have all kinds of great advantages. But guess what? It all comes down to, no matter what type of system we're installing, it all comes down to proper installation. Whether it be an old school air conditioning system, whether it be a chiller system, whether it be a VRF system, or a super highly advanced refrigeration system, they all have one weakness, that is the installation contractor. If the installation contractor does not follow proper refrigerant practices and proper protocol set out by the manufacturer of said equipment, then that equipment is going to have a high failure rate. And it's going to make that equipment have a black eye, because everybody's going to think this equipment sucks. Well, if that person had followed the manufacturer's instructions and, set it up the way that they said, or, then it more than likely is going to be taken care of, and it's probably going to work a little bit better, okay? So I think VRF systems, mini split systems, like the smaller ones for residential, I think it's a cool concept. I do. Where I want to see things going, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet, is bringing more hydrocarbon refrigerants, because they're so efficient. I know everybody's afraid that they're flammable, but I think they need to go ahead and increase the charge limitations so we can use more hydrocarbon refrigerants. That will help our refrigerant systems, or refrigeration systems. They'll be much more efficient. And I think that we can bring hydrocarbons into residential situations too. Now, I'm not necessarily saying we need to have 7 pounds of R290 pumping through your house, but 7 pounds really isn't that much when you think about it. But I think that, again, this is off the top of my head. I'm surprised we haven't come up with some sort of a chiller system for the residential setup where we have a condensing. I know they have chiller systems for residential, but I'm surprised they're not more mainstream, where we have a hydrocarbon refrigerant outside and we're pumping some sort of a glycol fluid inside. So then we're not even bringing the flammable refrigerant in the house, which might solve some of people's worries. I mean, but the funny thing is that we're afraid of flammable refrigerants, yet we drive a car with gasoline, which is very volatile, right? And we have natural gas heating our house, which is very volatile, but yet we don't want propane running through our refrigeration systems. It just seems kind of silly to me. You know, I think that it's just a little bit of old school mentality there and people being afraid of things. But, you know, it's funny that the guy can bitch about working on an R290 system, but then 2 hours later he can go work on a furnace. It just, again, not judging anybody. That's just my 2 cents on it. Okay. All right. Let me see. Anything to keep in mind. This is Storm's question. Anything to keep in mind for units that operate in a wide ambient temperature range. In Anchorage, you can get as low as -20 during the winter and 80 degrees in the summer. And that's a really good point. So refrigeration in general, let's just talk about refrigeration, because even an air conditioner is a refrigeration system. But refrigeration in general has a very small operating envelope in its infancy, right? So a refrigeration system, I would be safe to say, typically operates best between a 70-degree ambient and an 80-degree ambient. Maybe you can push it up to 90, but anything past that, it starts to have some issues, right? Because anything below 70 degrees, and we will drop the pressure differential across the expansion valve. Our head pressure will go too low. We won't have that refrigerant pressure to drive the refrigerant through the system, right? And we go any higher and we're going to have a hard time rejecting the heat from the condenser. So we add extra components to the system. That's where condenser flooding comes in to bring up to bring up condensing temperatures to increase pressure differentials across the system. And that's where you bring in, you know, all sorts of cooling medias to cool off condensers and different things like that. So as far as tips about working on systems is just understanding how they work. If you're working on systems in Alaska, I guarantee you're going to have some sort of head pressure control, whether it be fan cycling, condenser flooding, or probably both. So you have to understand that refrigerant charge is very critical when you're dealing with condenser flooding, right? Because when that head pressure control valve goes to flood, you need to have the proper amount of refrigerant in the system for it to flood properly. Same thing goes with a fan cycling control. You need to understand that if you have multiple condenser fan motors and you have multiple fan cycle controls, that you don't necessarily want all 3 condenser fan motors turning off at the same time. So you want to stage them. So that way one turns off at, let's say, 200 PSI. Another one turns off at, let's say, you know what I mean? And you can stage them. Or maybe you start one at 250, one at 225, one at 200. So that way you don't have a huge swing when the fans all turn off, okay? So understanding the sequence of operation, understanding how the systems work, and knowing what happens if you don't have that component in there to help the system operate properly in those harsh temperatures, okay? Also, understanding how to properly set pressure controls can really come into effect when you're in cold ambience. Because if you're in a cold ambient and you have a low pressure cutout and you have it set too high, well, guess what? When it gets really cold outside, there might not be enough pressure built up in that condensing unit to drive that refrigerant all the way through the system, through the evaporator, and back up to the roof or wherever your equipment's at to bring the system back on. So again, going back to our fundamentals, doesn't matter how complex of a system you're working on, you need to understand the fundamentals, okay? One of the scariest things, and I am not an expert, and nor will I ever be, but one of the scariest things is thermodynamics, psychrometrics. Those are the big words, and they're the most confusing things. But when you really break them down, they're the backbone of our industry. Understanding what happens to a fluid or a gas when you do something to it helps you to be able to troubleshoot it later, okay? Hopefully I answered your question in somewhat of a way. Let me see. What preventative maintenance measures do hydrocarbon compressors have to offset flammability risks? I wouldn't say that there's really much inside of a hydrocarbon compressor that is going to offset flammability risks. I would say, and again, I'm not an expert in this, but in my opinion, a compressor is a compressor. It's still got a motor in it. It still has windings in it. The refrigerant's still cooling the windings, so it can't be completely covered up. But you're typically not going to have an explosion. You're not going to have, what do you need for a fire? You need oxygen, you need a spark, and you need fuel, right? You need the right amount of oxygen, the right amount of fuel, and the perfect amount of a spark to ignite a flame. But you're not going to get all of that in a sealed system because you're not going to have pure oxygen in there. You're going to have a mixture of refrigerant and all kinds of things. Now, where you might have a problem, and where I think you're leading me to with your question, is on the outside of the compressor. What they want you to do when they have hydrocarbon refrigerants is they typically have sealed components. The condenser fan motor, for instance, is typically going to be a sealed motor that's explosion proof, okay, versus an open winding motor. The compressor's start relay, or the current relay is typically going to be a sealed current relay now. It's no longer going to be an open winding where you can see the actual start winding on it, okay? That's the biggest thing that they do on hydrocarbon systems. And they put, you know, the condenser fan motors, the evaporator fan motors, everything is explosion proof. They don't use wire nuts very much anymore. I have seen some manufacturers, but a lot of manufacturers are going away from wire nuts. They're using Wago connectors. So that way their theory is that they'll have less chance of a spark or a loose wire nut. So it's really about just understanding how the system works. If I can give you any advice working on a hydrocarbon system, is to cover your butt and follow proper refrigeration practices. You don't got to be afraid of it. Purge with nitrogen before you light your torch. Easy enough, guys, right? Make sure you purge with nitrogen, sweep the system, cut as many components out as you can. Sometimes you can't. I've shown that. Sometimes you got to open a system up with the torch. It's just, it is what it is, but try to purge it with nitrogen first. Make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. And if you ever change components on a hydrocarbon system, R290, R600, whatever, use OEM-only components. Because guess what? If something happens on that system, the manufacturer is going to look at you when the customer goes to sue them, and they're going to say, he wasn't using an OEM whatever. And they're going to blame it on you. And guess what? Their lawyers are better than yours. So you're not going to win. It doesn't matter if it was an obscene point that they made. You altered it from original equipment manufacturer's design, so therefore you own it now. So use OEM only parts all the way down to an electrical cord. If the customer runs over an electrical cord on their R290 refrigerator, order the factory cord, even if it costs $75 and you know you can go get one for $7 at Home Depot. Order the OEM cord, okay? That's the best advice I can give you. Let me see what we got inside the chat. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. What's the difference between high ambient temperature motors and regular motors? Mr. Ice, honestly, I don't know the answer to that one, bud. I would assume that high ambient motors have better bearings inside of them. But again, I'm guessing this off the top of my head. But I would make an assumption that a high ambient motor is going to have a better bearing that can have a better grease inside of it that's going to withstand higher temperatures. I'm going to assume that the motor's probably designed to run at a higher current. And it's somewhat cooled by the air going across it possibly. But again, I don't know that answer. We would have to talk to the motor manufacturer to ask them what the actual difference is, okay? What certification should someone aim for? Andrew K., that's a great question, and that's going to lead me into another question too. Any certification is better than no certification, guys. I don't care if it's NATE, if it's ESCO, if it's RSES, CM certification, whatever it is, guys. Yes, some of them, in my opinion, are a money grab from the manufacturer, but guess what a certification does for you? Every one of those certification out there, except for the EPA, and I think they might be changing that too, requires that you continue your education. So in order to maintain that certification, you got to continue your education. So that's why I say any certification is better than none, because to maintain a certification, you got to continue your education. You got to keep going to classes. You got to keep doing this. So you don't just sit stagnant remembering the information you were taught 40 years ago. Even though some of that information is valuable, there's new information today. So any certification is better than none. It really depends on where you're going. But I will say, if you want the top of the top, the best of the best, you need to be able to pass the RSES CM exam, the certificate member exam. If you can pass the RSES CM exam, that's the top of the top, in my opinion, as far as certifications go. Okay? All right, let me see what else we got inside here. I'm going to go ahead and look at my, what's a good scale to use when you have to charge R290 with the mount being so low? Henry D, I even ran into that problem myself using my field piece scale the other day because it didn't read in the tenth of grams that it needed to, right? It was only reading every 5 grams, and I needed to weigh in like 12 ounces or something like that, and my scale wouldn't do it. So, but is there really a big difference between 10 grams and 15 grams when you're trying to go for 12? I just went with the 15 or whatever it was, you know. So I don't know. I still like the field piece one. That's still my favorite one, but that's definitely an interesting problem we run into, okay? Let me see. I'll say magic. When I go with my wife to the grocery store, do I catch myself looking at the freezer's temp and duct? Oh, yes. I analyze everything. My wife gets mad at me because I don't pay attention to her. So, all right, I'm going to get to my list right here. I talked about that. Talked about that. Great question here. So can you drop in MO99 on top of R22, or can you use MO99 without an oil change? I paraphrased that question because I didn't know exactly what you were asking me, so I'm going to go ahead and answer both. Can you drop in R22 on MO99? Sure you can, but it won't be right. I don't care how many people say it works. It's not right. If you read the manufacturer's literature for MO99, it tells you do not mix it with other refrigerants. Some people will tell you otherwise. It is not right. Now, you may be able to get it to half-ass work. Maybe, but it's not right. Don't do it. It just confuses the next person when they come up on that system and they try to work on it. And how do they know what's in there? So now they're going to dump in more R22, or who knows? Maybe they'll dump in some other refrigerant into there. So don't mix refrigerants, bottom line, okay? Now, can you use MO99 without an oil change? Well, the manufacturer's data will tell you that MO99 works best with polyester oil, but the manufacturer's data will also tell you that you can use it without an oil change, meaning that you can use it with mineral oil. I personally don't use alternative refrigerants. I use R22 to this day. I have used alternative refrigerants. I've gotten my butt kicked by them. The one that I used, and again, it was user error, okay? It was my error. I used 427A, and I used it on a Train 3D scroll compressor, and I lost the compressor 2 days later. And then guess what? I used it again. I got a warranty compressor, and I put the new one in, and I lost it 2 days later. I went through 2 Train 3D scroll compressors using R427A. It was my mistake because I later found some documentation saying do not use this on Train 3D scroll compressors, and it caused some issues, okay? It was using mineral oil. I had some issues. It was about the oil return. It was a pain in the butt. So I personally don't use alternative refrigerants. What I'm going to do is I'm going to direct you to my buddy Ralph. My buddy Ralph works for Honeywell Refrigerants. He has all sorts of literature. He's a super smart dude. I'm going to give you his email right now. You can feel free to email Ralph. I know you guys that watch this regularly have seen his name in here a lot. I don't even know if he's in here today, but I'm going to go ahead and pop his email in here right now. Feel free to send Ralph at Honeywell an email, okay? He will answer all your questions about how the refrigerants work, what you should do. There's all kinds of different methods. I'm not a fan of them, but, you know, he can help you the best as he can, so. Let me see. What else do I got on my list right here? Just going through it here. Okay, so I want to cover this one. Real quick, I'm going to say that for those of you that just came in, I know I announced this at the beginning. My wife and I finally did another one of the HVACR Life videos. We are releasing it. I just uploaded it today. It's not live on the channel yet. It'll be live Wednesday at 11 a.m. West Coast time, 2 p.m. East Coast time. So feel free to check it out. It's one where we talk about financial stuff and OCD and all kinds of other things. So that's kind of like a little mini series that my wife and I worked on last year. We hadn't really done any in the last couple months, but we just been dragging ass on uploading another one. So that'll be coming out here Wednesday. Okay, you guys will see that pop up. So the next thing I want to get to is YouTube. Podcasts, I don't really like this term, but being a social influencer or social media guy, whatever. I just consider myself a normal service technician that happens to have a camera and a YouTube account. Okay, I don't think there's much special about myself. I'm just like everybody else. But there is a term that people refer to me as like a social influencer or a YouTuber or whatever. Something that comes with that, though. Something that comes with putting myself out on the internet. And it's, you know, it's one of those things you just have to learn to deal with. Is you have to have thick skin. I get questions on the weekly of people asking me, hey, do you have any tips for me uploading videos on YouTube? How can I do this? How can I make the best videos? How can I be the most popular YouTuber? I want to have the best podcast out there. How do I do it? Okay, I am not an expert, but I'm going to tell you how I did it, guys, right? And I'm not some super famous, successful person, but how I did it when I started and how I continue to do it is I uploaded videos from my employees, and one day I decided to make them public. Still to this day, I make the videos for my employees. I don't expect anything from the videos. I'm not going to lie and say I'm not addicted to the analytics. I do get addicted to it at times. It's hard for me to put my phone down because I'm curious about how many views this got and different things like that. It's a nasty disease that comes with putting YouTube videos up and becoming a social influencer or whatever, is being addicted to the numbers. But I don't try as hard as you guys think. I mean, there's an effort to put up a video or 2 videos a week, but what I mean is that I'm not going out there making a video saying this is going to be a popular video and it's going to get views. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for that, guys. I'm going to put a video out there that I think First off, they're service call videos. I really don't predict my videos and I don't plan them. I just take my phone with me and I pop it out when I'm on a service call. I don't really get to pick my service calls. I mean, I kind of do because I'm the owner, but you know, I don't plan these videos. They are what they are. And if it's interesting to someone, you know, then great. But I'm not planning them. I'm not going out there saying, this is going to get me the most views in the world. That's not how I'm approaching it. So that's how I roll, okay? I'm not out there trying to get views. I'm trying to get my message out because I want to spread the message. The big picture diagnosis thing, that's what I want to spread to everybody. And I'm going to warn you guys, if any of you mention big picture diagnosis on your podcast, your YouTube videos, your live streams, whatever, I'm going to send you a bill, okay? That's an inside joke between Zach and I, but I'm just joking. But you know, I just want to get my message out there and share the little bit of knowledge that I have, guys. Truly, that's all that I'm there for. Yes, I make a couple bucks from these videos. It just comes with it, okay? It's cool. It helps. It's no big deal. But I don't make these videos to make money. So that's the best advice I can give to anybody out there that wants to share their knowledge. And I encourage you guys, share it, right? But share factual knowledge. Share knowledge that's meaningful, that's truthful, that's not deceiving, that's not mischievous, okay? Don't tell someone the wrong thing, the wrong way to do it. I do make mistakes and I admit them up front. Also, another thing, if you want to start posting videos on YouTube, you want to become a podcaster, a media person, whatever, you need to have thick skin and you need to make sure that you think about it before you put it out there, because you put incorrect information out there and I can absolutely 100% guarantee you, you're going to be told. And it's not just by one person. There's thousands of people out there watching these videos and they're going to tell you you're wrong. So be ready to defend it, but also don't get your feelings hurt, okay? Again, this all goes down to, I don't really do this to become popular, to make money. I do this to share the little bit of knowledge that I have, and I try to be as factual as possible. I try to think things through before I say them. I truly mean it. If you guys have been watching for a long time, so I'll get the question too, how do you make videos and fairly charge the customer? You're sitting there talking to a camera the whole time when you should just be working. Okay, I have problems in my head. Genuinely, okay? They are diagnosed mental issues. And I talk to myself all day long. Guys, I rehearse conversations when I'm driving down the road. Nobody in the car, no radio going on. I'll have a conversation with someone rehearsing it like I'm going to talk to them. I do talk to myself and I answer myself, okay? So turning this camera on and talking to it is no different than the way that I diagnose and troubleshoot things. That's how I fix things. I logically talk myself through them. So I walk up to it and I say, okay, the condenser fan motor's not running. I'm verbally saying this as I'm working on something. I do this, I do that. So what's the difference between turning my phone on? Okay. So anyways, that's enough of that. Let me get into the questions and see if I'm missing anything. Always remember, change your dang filters. Yes, I do. I don't know where that came from, but really appreciate a thumbs up on the stream, guys. It definitely helps it out. Did the movie quote pop up yet? I don't know if that popped up. Oh yeah, it did. Anybody guess the movie quote yet? It's an obscure movie from the 90s. So I'm curious if anybody got it yet. I don't see anything in there. There's no reward for it, but I pop up those movie quotes. So yeah, that's definitely an obscure one. So I'm curious if anybody will get that one. Yes, I am a mumbler, but I vocalize my words. I'm not mumbling, just mumbles. Anyone who does restaurant refrigeration has problems. That is very true, Total Tech. Okay, so I'm going to get to my list here. New technician going to tech school. All right. Sent me an email, gentlemen. I actually got a couple, so I'm paraphrasing and kind of mashing this question together because I got a couple of them. So on my notes, it says, new technician going to school, taking every class they can, will start as an apprentice. Any advice? And yes, first off, understand something. No matter how much schooling you have to have experience to be a legit technician that knows what he's doing. School is not enough experience to go out there and become a service tech. If a company is hiring you directly out of school and throwing you into a van without any support and expecting you to bust out service calls, they're misleading you. They're doing you an injustice, and you're going to hurt yourself too, okay? You need to have experience. That's my opinion, guys, okay? I know that some people do that and they survive, but the vast majority of people will not survive in that situation, and it's going to make them hate this industry. It's going to make them get fired. I can't handle the complaint that I see on social media when I see business owners saying these tech schools aren't teaching these guys anything. It's bullshit. A tech school gives you some knowledge. It doesn't give you all the knowledge. They're going to have to come work for you. They're going to have to learn in the field. They're going to need a proper apprenticeship. They're going to need to work their way up. You need experience. School will not teach you experience. School will not teach you how to interact with a manager when they're pissed off because you're the third person that's been there from your company and nobody can seem to fix it. And guess what? As you're looking at it, you realize that the technician before you screwed it up, but you can't say anything, right? School will not teach you that. So understand something. Just because you have all these classes in school, you are not going to come out of school making top dollar. You're going to start, for the most part, making entry-level wages. Doesn't matter how much schooling you have, okay? This isn't, you're not a teacher starting with your master's degree kind of crap. It doesn't work that way, okay? You got to break your teeth on some real work. You got to bust your knuckles. You got to get your hands dirty, and you got to work your way up. That's my opinion. Okay. So that's the best advice I can give to someone going to school. The next thing, when you come out of school, be humble, be quiet, and know when to ask questions. Take lots of pictures. And when you go home, you're not off work. When you go home is the time to do research. You ask questions when you're at work. You get somewhat of an answer because you're probably working with a technician that's busy and he's going to give you just a general answer. Write them down. When you're at work, take pictures of every piece of equipment, even if it's not an air conditioner. Go home and research. Start doing the real work when you go home. When you first start in this trade, you're going to put in long hours. You're going to put in long nights, and it's not necessarily working on the clock. You're going to go home and you're going to research. You're going to do the best you can to strive at that company. And that's what's going to make you successful. Be hungry. Be willing to work overtime. Be willing to be a grunt. Be willing to go to the van and get parts. There's value in everything. Even if you're just a gopher, if someone's sending you down to the van to go get parts the entire time, there's value in that. Because guess what? Okay, let's say you're on a job with a journeyman technician and you're doing a compressor changeout and he sends you down to the van to go get 5 parts. And tomorrow, you're doing a similar job with that journeyman technician. Guess what? He shouldn't have to send you down to the van. You should ask him before he's ready, or you should go down to the van before he's ready and anticipate what he's going to ask you to get. That is the value you can learn from being a gopher. You can learn the organization of his van. You can learn how good and proper organization can help you. You can learn how disorganization doesn't necessarily mean that he's a bad technician, right? Because there's some people that are disorganized that are the best technicians in the world. But there's value in everything. Even in a crappy job, there's value. Because guess what? You're learning what you don't want to work for anymore. You're learning the traits that are in a person that you don't want to work for. So you take from that value, all right? Know when to open your mouth and know when to shut your mouth. Even if you see a journeyman technician doing a bad job, you know, you're in school and they preach proper refrigerant vacuums and you need to see 500 microns or below on every system. Well, guess what? In the real world, vacuums aren't always perfect. We don't always get to pull a perfect vacuum, okay? So, or maybe a journeyman technician doesn't pull a vacuum at all. It's not right. Do I do that? No, but it's not right. But guess what? Know when to shut your mouth. And maybe after the job, you ask them, hey, I have a question. Instead of being a punk about it, you don't got to be rude. Just say, hey, I noticed you didn't pull a vacuum. What's going on there? Why didn't we pull? Because I was always taught, and ask it in the form of a question. I was always taught in school that you're supposed to pull a vacuum, so I'm confused. See, the best way to do that is to ask a question about it without being hostile, without saying you're wrong because you didn't do this right, right? So there's value in everything you can do as an entry-level person, okay? The next question has this to do with the same thing, and let me go right here. Oh, yeah, that's pretty much it. I pretty much looped those two in together. So I kind of went off on a tangent, but I feel very passionate about that, right? Because the new guys coming in, we need you. We need you all that want to get into this trade. We need the help. There's plenty of work. You're not going to take our jobs. There's plenty of work. But we need you to come in and we need you to be moldable. We need you to be able to learn. We need you to not be cocky. And when you go to work, this is my pet peeve. When you go to work, your personal life and your home life needs to stay at home. I understand that, you know, your wife just left you and that sucks. But guess what? In that situation, in my opinion, not judging anybody, but in my opinion, you shouldn't come to work that day if you can't focus. If you can't come to work and focus on what's going on, then you need to take a personal day. When you come to work, you need to come to work and you need to be ready and you need to be there. If you've got personal stuff at home, you either need to leave it at home or you need to stay with it at home. Okay? So now that I'm getting off on a deep end that I can't get out of, I'm going to go ahead and get to the chat and see if I missed any questions. Okay? Let me see. Everyone is replaceable. That is true. Um, let me see what I'm missing in here, guys. Throw your questions in caps lock, and let me see. Ask the right questions. That is right. I'm just kind of scrolling through here. Learn the refrigeration process and sequence of operation. That is very, very right. Lots of great advice coming on here, okay? You did send me the email right on HVAC Apprentice. Good. I hope I answered your question there, bud. So let me see what I'm missing. Invest in yourself, because guess what? Investing in yourself, as Bear Down said, is the best investment you can make. Because if you invest in yourself when you go home and you're off the clock, but you continue to work, you're going to be a better person when you go to work the next day. And guess what? It doesn't matter if you work for that company or you get fired from that company. They can't take your knowledge away. Or you quit that company or you just decide on good terms. Guess what? All the knowledge that you learned is yours to keep. So do the best you can to get all the knowledge from anywhere in the right way. Don't be a punk about it. But the knowledge that you learn is yours to keep forever, and nobody can take that from you. Okay? That's an important thing to remember. I'm a big suction line. Okay, so Dakota Man, dude, thank you very much, man. Thank you for that super chat, dude. That is awesome. You guys are awesome with these super chats. Thank you. Let me see. Brad, you said you're a big suction line dryer. Just got to change the inside sometimes. Okay, I got you. Is that a metaphor for... Okay, I get that. Let me see what else we got. See what I'm missing in here. And let me see what I got on my list here that I missed. I'm going to go through and make sure I didn't miss anything. What did I miss? When you're turbo intelligent, you cannot be replaced. Nah, I'd beg to differ there, Twizman, or Twisdom. Because, you know, I understand, yes, a lot of intelligence. And, okay, so that's a fair statement to say. Yes. But let's preface it with saying, okay, so Twisdom said that, you know, when you do have all that knowledge, you're not replaceable. And there is truth in that statement for sure. So, yes, you are right. Because if you're a value to that company, I think that would be a better way to say it. Once you become a bigger value to the company, then it's harder for them to replace you, okay? And again, remembering that even if they choose to replace you, you get to take that value elsewhere and you get to take that knowledge elsewhere. So you become a technician that is sought after. It doesn't matter what company. But yes, if you become an ideal technician and you have the knowledge and you have the customer service and that diamond in the rough, you will be set for life, for sure. All right. Let me see. Definitely, guys, I know I'm missing a bunch of stuff in here as usual. Feel free to send me an email if I miss your guys' questions. I try to get to it, okay? Pay attention, take it slow, look for the little things. That is what you have learned so far. And that's very good advice. Big picture diagnosis, right? All right, and I'm going to go through and see if I have anything else. Oh, yeah, I do. Guys, I'm going to play a clip right now. Okay, so on the walk-in cooler or the hybrid walk-in cooler video that I had made, okay, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, okay? I don't know all the techie answers. I ask the Google a lot of questions, okay, and I tend to find the right answers. But even asking the Google, you've got to research to find out if you're getting the right information, okay? But I'm a hands-on kind of person. I like to take things apart. I like to figure out why things break. So when it comes to my hybrid walk-in freezer video, okay, I went ahead and pulled the expansion valve out, the one that was bad, and I brought it back into my office. I had it in here today, and I made a little clip of me dissecting what went wrong with that expansion valve. I'm going to go ahead and play that clip right now. Let me transition over, and let me go full screen. And let me turn up the volume. And I'm going to go ahead and play this clip for you guys. And we'll come back here in just a minute. Okay. What we have here, this is our expansion valve that my most recent video, I made a video about it. It wouldn't regulate. I couldn't control the superheat, basically. It had been... someone else had been wrenching on it, and when I got there, I believe it was like 30 degrees superheat, and I tried adjusting the valve down after I adjusted the refrigerant charge and got it back up to normal, and the superheat would not come into range. I think the lowest I could get it was like 17 degrees or something. So I went ahead and quoted. Now, I had a theory, and I mentioned in the video that more than likely I thought the problem was just the power head, because there's really not a whole lot that can fail on these expansion valves. But it's always best to check the strainer. Now, I haven't opened this valve up, but I did crack everything so that way I could just do it by finger, because you do have to use wrenches to open these. The strainer is relatively clean. I don't see any problems with that. So we're going to go ahead and open up the power head. Now, this is a BQ valve. So this was built, and I'll show you guys some examples of the BQ kit, but you basically build this. Actually, this is a B valve, or a Q valve, I should say. So this one has a little Allen wrench, and you take the cartridge out, so it's not a balanced port. All right, so the power head has signs of a little bit of oil in there. Other than that, it looks like a normal power head. And let's go ahead and take the valve apart and see what the insides look like. Nothing jumping out at me. There is some looks like it was gumminess in there. It's not sticky, but there's something residual crap. But you know, there's really not a whole lot that can fail in these valves. There's a spring. There's your little pin. There's the other side of your superheat adjustment stem. And then your cartridge is inside, which is your orifice, right? And I don't have the wrench to pull that out, but it's just an orifice. And then you've got your push rods, and it's probably not focusing right there, but then you got your push rods. So the push rods are pushing up right here. The push rods come out. So really, there's not a whole lot in these valves, guys. The only thing that usually happens is if they're sticky or something. I will say there's quite a bit of oil in this valve, I'm noticing, but nothing too crazy. All right, so what we have here, like I said, this is a non-balanced port valve. And I was thinking that it was the power head. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a little experiment. Usually, if I could have changed this power head, if it was a if it was easier to get to, I would have just changed it. And more than likely that would have solved the problem. But what we're going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and clip this tip, and I want you to listen to how much of the gas charge sprays out, if any. Let me do this. I got almost no gas charge spraying out of this. This is a SB or Sam Zebra Paul, so it is a pressure limiting power head. Now, I've got a good pressure limiting power head right here. We're going to go ahead and cut it and compare the difference of when you have a properly well, it looks like we barely got anything blown out of that one too. There we go. Don't know if you guys can hear that, but this one actually has refrigerator or the pressure coming out of it versus this one didn't. It's very slight. Very, very slight. You can barely even hear it. I don't even know if the camera would have picked that up. But I'm leaning towards the power head being the problem. Now, I like to tear things apart. I have a non-pressure limiting power head here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that and show you guys the difference between a non-pressure limiting. Don't know if you guys can hear that, but there's quite a bit of charge. You can actually see the vapor coming out of it. So this is a non-pressure limiting. Granted, this is a R22 charge, but this one too, same thing. We're still spraying, and it's boiling off. It's cold, so there's a slight bit of refrigerant in there too. But there is a difference. That's the difference between a pressure limiting and non-pressure limiting. Now, whether or not the camera picked up the SZP, this one had almost no spray out. It was very minimal, but this one had more. Definitely not as much as the non-pressure limiting though, okay? But there was a difference in what was spraying out of this basically. So other than that, I don't see anything else wrong with this valve. This is the original one, and this is the original components. Everything is working fine. So I'm pretty confident that the problem from the original valve was just a bad power head. But again, because it was so difficult to get in there, it was easier just to change the entire valve. Trying to see if I can get this thing to spray out. Doesn't want to spray on me. Nope, there's like nothing coming out of that. While this one is still spraying the non-pressure limiting. Still has vapor coming out of it. So, all right, I'm pretty confident that our problem with that expansion valve was the power head. And again, I don't know how well the camera picked that up. Okay, something that I want to point out is this is a Sporlan BQ expansion valve kit. With this kit, I'm able to pretty much go up on almost all of my jobs, whether be small refrigeration or medium-sized refrigeration. I don't work on the giant stuff, and pretty much build any expansion valve that I need. Now, this particular kit that I'm showing you right now is actually a beta kit. Sporlan is working on possibly changing their design to this heavy-duty case that's got foam padding in it. The previous kit was a little bit different. In the previous kit, if and when they do release this kit, they'll have the instruction manuals and how to build the valve in the kit. But you guys get the point. So basically, I can just figure out which kind of design I want. I can open it up, find the cartridge that I want, build whatever I need. And I'll show you the old kit right now because I happen to have my old one. So this is the standard kit. This is what I've had in my truck forever. And if you open this up, you can see I actually pulled these valve and this element out of here. But you can see that we have the instructions on how to build it, all the information, what cartridge does what tonnage, all that good information. There's even instructions on how to, assemble the valve, which is pretty simple when you think about it. Yeah, and you can pretty much build anything. So I love having this kit on me because whenever I need an expansion valve or a power head, I usually have all the different flavors that I might need within my kit. All right, so you guys get the point. It's not super technical, not super, great production value or anything, but I mean, I just wanted to express that I like to disassemble parts, and that can make a better technician for all of you guys. Just simply taking something home and figuring out why it went bad. Pull up, I mean, you're not going to do it all the time, but the first time you cut open a scroll compressor, then you realize what can go wrong inside that compressor, right? You can do the work and say, hey, you know what? I know that this is probably happening. Or the first time you take apart a scroll compressor and you find what the pressure relief device looks like, and you realize how small of an orifice the pressure relief device has, and you realize that if the system has contaminants, that the pressure relief device within that compressor can get plugged up and maybe it's going to get stuck open now. Or if you let that condensing unit go off on high head pressure too many times, the pressure relief device can become weak. I mean, there's so much about going home, doing the research, taking parts apart, cutting things open, and figuring out why it failed, okay? Pull apart a scroll compressor, guarantee you're going to see copper plating inside of it. Copper plating is a sign of moisture in the system that led to acids in the system that led to, problem after problem, at bearing failures, all kinds of things, okay? So cut your components apart. It's definitely going to help you. I like to do it just because it helps me. And I may not be the smartest person in the world, but I understand things by taking them apart and looking at how they work and learning from my mistakes too, okay? So let me see if I'm missing anything. If the sensing bulb breaks, will the system lose its entire charge or just the power head? More than likely, it's going to be just the power head so long as the power head is not leaking by. But I have seen power heads that have leaks in them, and then theoretically you could lose a system charge, but it's not very common at all, okay? It would take a very long time, but I mean, it is possible. Same thing with a head pressure control valve. If you clip the tip on it, it is possible that the bellows can leak, and you can leak out the charge too. So, but yes, the power heads inside the expansion valve, they are a separate charge. They're a proprietary blend, is my understanding. Typically, they're somewhat relatable to the refrigerant that's in the system. That's why you might have a different power head for 22, 404, all those different ones. But yeah, they are some sort of a proprietary blend. All right, let's see what else we got inside there. The charge will migrate to the power head on the pressure limiting TXV valves. If the head is colder than the bulb, you can heat up the head to force it back. That's a good way to look at it. Let me see what else we have. To further illuminate, I'm reading Twisdom's thing. You said if you are sent with parts or to replace a part that is still functional, you now have 2 functioning parts. That's true. You thought if the bulb loses its charge, the valve opens completely. No, that's not accurate all the time. So, no, if the bulb loses its charge, the valve is going to slam shut on that particular valve. So, do I have to be certified to work with R290? No, you do not. There in the United States, there's no certification that says you have to have a certification to work on R290. I think actually technically, I don't even think you need to have an EPA certification, to be honest with you, but I could be wrong about that. So, what is the difference from a hybrid walk-in to a non-hybrid 4-liter powered? I kind of covered that earlier, but basically that's a term that I come up with. I have weird names for all kinds of things, okay? If I don't have a name for something, I call it a chingus. If on a hybrid walk-in cooler, the reason why I call it a hybrid walk-in cooler is because it's not quite a walk-in freezer because they're only maintaining 27 degrees in there, but it's not quite a walk-in cooler. So it's stuck in that purgatory right between, right? So in my opinion, a walk-in freezer is anything below 0 degrees. And in my opinion, a walk-in cooler is anything above 32 degrees. So the in-between or the purgatory, I call it a hybrid walk-in cooler. That's just my way of looking at things, but, you know, who am I? All right. Yeah, they are. Okay, Michael. So, Michael, you're the second person I saw it, but I also, HVAC Rookie, I think, or who was it that sent it to me? It was HVAC Apprentice was the first person that sent me a thing. But there's no, it was just, I post movie quotes in here, guys, to see if people can guess them. There was no reward for it. I've done it in the past where I've done a reward, but there's no reward. I just post movie quotes to see if anybody can grab them. And it was Boondock Saints for sure. So, let me see. You had no clue there. Yep, it's its own charge. And Twiz, you are right. I had mentioned in the video that those push rods are pushing up. They were pushing up. I meant as in they were coming up out of the valve. But yes, the thermostatic power head is pushing down on the push rods, opening the valve, and the spring pressure is opposing that force. So, and they work against each other, and the spring pressure, you can adjust it to adjust the superheat, basically. But yes, those push rods, when the power head screws down, those rods are pushing down, opening up the diaphragm, essentially. But then you have the spring pressure on the bottom pushing against the diaphragm, and that's how you set your superheat. Let's see. What am I missing? All right, gentlemen, I am going to wrap this up. I really, really appreciate you guys coming in here. It's been a pleasure. Any questions, anything that I didn't answer, please send me an email to hvacrvideos@gmail.com. As usual, I always say I'm do these videos every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, work permitting. My wife and I have uploaded the new How We Live the HVACR Life video that will be dropping Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We also have a new tool review channel where I'm going to be uploading very soon. There's a link all over in the show notes and everything. The new Discord server, guys. There's a Discord server. Also, I don't have a link in here, but I will put a link. There's 2 Discord servers. There's multiple Discord servers, right? There's an HVAC Talk Discord server, and that's actually where Twiz is from, Twisdom. And there's also my Discord server, too, that has myself and all the YouTube creators. So the HVAC Talk Discord server has a lot of more technical information than my YouTube server. My YouTube server is a way for you guys to continue the chat conversation that happens within our live streams, basically. Okay, so I'll definitely put a link for both Discord servers in the show notes of this video, and feel free to check them out. Other than that, guys, I really, really appreciate it, and I'm going to go ahead and cue up the outro music, and we're going to go ahead and, if I can figure out how to do this correctly, turn that off, and I'm going to transition to the exit screen, and I really appreciate it, and we will catch you guys on the next one, okay?